Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the escalating geopolitical friction right along the Ontario-Michigan border. We're looking at a literal perfect storm here. You've got Trump-era Washington USMCA tariffs, ongoing CUSMA trade disputes, Ontario Premier Doug Ford's regulatory maneuvers, and right in the middle of it all, the massive flow of municipal solid waste, or MSW, being shipped across the border from Ontario, Canada, for disposal in US-Michigan landfills. It's a seriously complex logistics puzzle, but we're going to break down exactly how it all operates and look at the fascinating digital architecture that's stepping in to save the day.
So, to make sense of this massive structural shift, here is our roadmap. We'll walk through 1. The Ontario-Michigan Waste Corridor. 2. USMCA tariffs and regulatory threats. 3. The 905 Wood Sentient Bridge. 4. The digital refinery AI workflow. 5. Explainable compliance and documentation. And finally, 6. Securing the circular bioeconomy. Let's get into it.
Starting with Section 1, the Ontario-Michigan Waste Corridor, a massive integrated MSW pipeline that is currently under immense pressure.
We really have to start by wrapping our heads around the sheer scale of the physical logistics involved here. 3.46 million. That number is absolutely foundational. It represents the 3.46 million tons of trash that the state of Michigan imports from Ontario every single year. This massive export volume? It's primarily driven by historically cheap dumping fees in the American Midwest, coupled with rapidly depleting landfill space back in Ontario.
And that creates a deep dependency. To put this into perspective, Canadian waste accounts for a staggering 14.35% of all waste disposed of in Michigan landfills today. Basically, Michigan has the capacity and Ontario has the excess generation. But, when one jurisdiction holds nearly 15% of another's disposal burden, it creates massive exposure to political shifts.
The pressure cooker is really building on both sides of the border. Ontario is actually expected to completely run out of domestic landfill space in just 9 years, by 2034. Because of that, the province is currently exporting about 27% of its total landfilled waste. At the exact same time, Michigan is pushing back and hard. Governor Gretchen Whitmer is proposing tipping fee hikes that would skyrocket from a mere 36 cents to a whopping $5 per ton. Make no mistake, this move is specifically designed to generate revenue and drastically curb those out-of-state imports.
Moving on to Section 2. USMCA tariffs and regulatory threats, the geopolitical squeeze on traditional waste hauling. Now, this financial squeeze isn't just local. It is being heavily compounded by sweeping macroeconomic trade policies. Looking at the year-to-date headline news trends, we're seeing a rapid escalation of friction in 2026. Following U.S. Supreme Court rulings striking down emergency executive tariffs, Ontario pushed through Bill 5 to expand their own domestic waste sites. But the real earthquake hit in July, when the U.S. declined a 16-year extension of the USMCA Pact. That decision essentially forced the entire treaty into a precarious regime of mandatory annual joint reviews.
So what's the crucial takeaway here? It's that the predictable low-cost border flow of the past is completely dead. It's being replaced by a highly litigious, high-stakes environment. We are shifting from those old 36-cent tipping fees and simple visual checks by border guards straight into $5 surcharges, mandatory advanced radiation scans, and the constant looming threat of retaliatory tariffs. Trade compliance isn't just paperwork anymore. It literally dictates whether a waste hauling company survives the month.
In direct response to these border threats and the ongoing CUSMA limbo, Ontario Premier Doug Ford's government passed Bill 5. This legislation aggressively guts environmental assessment rules to bypass municipal resistance and fast-track controversial domestic sites like the Dresden landfill. While the goal is to solve the domestic capacity crisis, it's facing intense local and Indigenous opposition. So relying solely on domestic expansion? It's incredibly fraught.
That brings us to Section 3, 905 Wood, the Sentient Bridge, a technological counteroffensive to all this regulatory chaos.
So you might be wondering, how on earth does a waste operator survive when trade compliance directly dictates their corporate margins? Enter the 905 Wood digital refinery. This digital architecture acts as a sentient bridge. It's the critical link between the chaotic reality of construction waste and the strict, high-purity requirements of the pyrogenic biocarbon market. They're using deep technology to ensure absolute compliance before a truck ever hits the border, completely modernizing how municipal solid waste is tracked.
There's a quote from them, "Wood only isn't a limitation, it's the moat." I absolutely love this framing because it shifts the entire narrative from playing defense to playing offense.
By hyper-focusing exclusively on clean wood disposal, 905 Wood builds an impenetrable regulatory and economic moat. When you aren't dealing with mixed garbage, you drastically reduce your exposure to those harsh environmental tariffs and domestic levies. The material itself becomes your greatest asset.
All right, Section 4, the Digital Refinery AI Workflow, Explainable Compliance at the Edge.
Let's look under the hood at the actual mechanics of this software engine. The 905 Wood Digital Refinery Application Workflow systematically transforms physical logistics into digital assets through 5 really precise steps. First, ingestion and profile mapping. Then, regional metadata enrichment, followed by sensor-based validation, logistics reconciliation, and finally, automated PDF documentation. This isn't just, taking notes on a clipboard. It is building an unshakable digital custodial log.
And the deployment of this cutting-edge hardware happens right at the source. They are literally utilizing the Google Pixel 10 Pro running Android 16's Light RT AI stack right there at the bin. Using the Gemma 4 E2B model, it delivers instant, guardrailed binary wood classification in under 500 milliseconds. Think about that speed. If the AI detects any ambiguity whatsoever, it rejects the load. Absolute purity starts right at the edge.
Now, while the Edge AI handles the physical sorting on the Pixel 10 Pro, the backend relies on some serious heavy-duty cloud computing. Vertex AI pipelines parse through thousands of pages of dense Ontario Regulation 347 codes to classify the waste automatically. Then AlloDB acts as the high-performance backbone, basically freezing that compliance data into a permanent, tamper-proof digital audit trail that's fully ready for U.S. customs inspectors during those annual USMCA sunset reviews.
Section 5. Explainable Compliance and Documentation, the digital audit trail that secures the border.
All of this incredibly sophisticated cloud architecture ultimately funnels into a rigorously structured output. The Digital Refinery Application Workflow generates UI/UX output PDF documentation features that cover the whole shebang. We're talking everything from the initial request for quote for structured intake to a modernized certificate of origin proving traceability. It provides stringent verification metrics and even mathematically proves USMCA compliance by verifying labor value content wage thresholds. By replacing legacy paper records with this dynamic digital transparency, the system totally neutralizes border friction. It converts visual checks into verifiable digital custodial logs. It guarantees the strict exclusion of prohibited materials, like PCBs and biologicals. It runs strategic financial exposure models for different tariff scenarios. And it secures active efforts compliance for true environmental stewardship. It is basically the ultimate shield against the chaos of the annual USMCA review cycle.
Finally, Section 6. Securing the circular bioeconomy, from waste liability to high-margin environmental asset. We absolutely have to look at the macroeconomic payoff here and how this compliance translates directly into financial engineering. Because the material is highly verified clean wood, operators can structurally bypass incoming penalties like Ontario's massive $60 per ton circle levy. That translates to an incredible $1,034 of direct savings on every single 144-yard mothership load. Plus, they employ a system of decoupled billing to completely separate logistics costs from disposal surcharges, giving clients total financial clarity.
But they're going a step further, which is wild. The refinery doesn't just save money, it generates actual assets. By tracking real-time methane reductions via ground and air sensors, the system mints this verified reduction data into carbon dividends, known as corks. This fundamentally transitions the whole concept of waste from a costly liability into a liquid environmental asset that literally offsets the cost of transboundary hauling.
And this is the grand strategy in action. By operationalizing advanced edge AI, like the Google Pixel 10 Pro with its Light LRT AI stack, and fusing it with an airtight digital audit trail, 905 Wood secures Ontario's industrial leadership in the global circular bioeconomy. They're taking chaotic municipal solid waste and turning it into a hyper-verified asset, thriving entirely despite the surrounding geopolitical chaos.
So it leaves us with a pretty stark reality. As international borders digitize and tariffs become weaponized under these annual USMCA reviews, is the sentient bridge the only viable path forward? In an era of AI-verified trade audits and escalating retaliatory tariffs, can traditional paper-based waste management possibly survive? It's a massive shift, and those clinging to the old ways of moving trash might just find themselves left at the border. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.